So that was not my first time working retail, but it was my first time working at that high of a management level and for a company with, really amazing corporate structure in place. So I learned a lot there. And while I was working there, they made a really great commitment to local artisans, local designers to do capsule collections. And so I was meeting these artists and these designers, and I was really impressed with their work. And, I would ask them, where can I find your stuff? And most people kind of had the same response. Well, arts markets once a month, and there didn't seem to be a hub that focused on local and regional design. So a couple years went by. I had kind of this idea to open a shop that really focused on that. And so I eventually made the leap to do that. I opened my first store at the beginning of 2012 and then my second store in 2015. And really, when I opened in 2012, I was one of the first and kind of only stores that really had a focus on local and regional designers. And that was a niche that I kind of held on to for a while, and it ended up not becoming such a niche industry anymore, which I was really proud to be a part of. So I had both stores for almost 6 years, and running your own business is really difficult. Running your own business while trying to start a family is really difficult. So I ended up closing my shops at the end of 2017 and moving more into a consulting role for retail brands that were looking to expand to New Orleans or expand their businesses throughout the Southeast. So I did that for a while. And on the side, I'd been kind of getting asked by friends and family members to help them with interiors, whether it was finishing up a room or styling a room. And it was something that I really loved. And, through my training in art history, I'd taken a lot of history of interiors, history of architecture. So I had a real appreciation for interiors and the design that went into a good space. And as I kept doing it more, I just really realized it was something that, I loved and I was passionate about. And I had an opportunity that came up a little more than a year ago to take on a whole home historic renovation, like down to the studs. And it was a huge learning curve, but it really kind of helped me get prepared to dive into this full time. So at the beginning of 2020, I transitioned into interiors full time. And it was a little scary at first because, I'm not a licensed interior designer. I do have, I think, a good background in aesthetics from my retail background and my art history background. Um, but there was always that question of like, am I going to get clients? Are people going to, trust me? And I kind of just leapt into it. And COVID, I feel very lucky because I know COVID has adversely affected a lot of people's businesses, and it had the opposite effect for me. People are spending more time at home than ever before, and they're not spending money on travel, and they're not spending money on going out to eat and entertainment. So people are really focusing on their spaces. And through word of mouth and through social media, my jobs went from a couple to a lot. So now I am really thankful to have clients here in New Orleans and then clients out of state. I have about 10 projects I'm working on right now, and 5 are in town, 5 are out of town. And it's been really fun to learn as I go. It's been really challenging to learn as I go, but I'm in a place where, I'm a single mom and I have been, on my own for almost a year and a half. My kids are almost 2. And I'm at a place where, I'm supporting myself, I'm supporting my kids, I'm putting them through school. I'm really proud of the business I've built so far, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And, I got introduced to the Wealth Edit through Kitty Brown. and just learned about this really great community. And I was like, this is like so needed. And I think it's so interesting because, female entrepreneurs are so prevalent and there's so much, talk about female entrepreneurship and the community that it creates. But when it comes to talking about money, it's still sometimes like very taboo and kind of tricky. And I've been really thankful to have, some women who are in the design industry share information with me about how they bill. My friend Janice is a designer based in Denver, and she went to design school. She got her licensing, and she said, listen, like, let me help you out with, figuring out your billing structure. Like, I want to share that information with you. So I've been, another is my friend Sarah Kate Little, who lives in Oklahoma City, and she's a very talented designer, and she shared a lot of really wonderful information with me, super helpful. So I just, I feel really lucky that, a group like this exists and that there's been women in my life who have been willing to talk about money with me and, not shy away from it. So that's kind of brings us to present day.
Hattie, I mean, there's so much there, and it so much embodies like the vision and the heart of what the wealth that it is. And, two things that I really want to like sit with for a little bit is one is like the process of moving from the dual income to the single income and what that looks like.
Mhm.
I know I've lived through that, and like you said, it's a taboo topic. People are embarrassed to talk about it. It's hard. Oftentimes, there's scaling back, there's adjusting, there's all those things. And you are also, left trying to figure out how to make it all work when before you've had a partner to talk it through and not be solely responsible. I often say, yeah, not always, but theoretically. And it's, I always say, being the sole breadwinner of the family is a heavy burden to bear. It just is. And but it also can be extremely empowering and life giving, like you said. Like, I'm really proud of what I've done, and I love hearing you say that. So, tell us what, like, maybe some of the ways that you handled that in the beginning and how you got over that hump.
So I think the biggest step for me in the beginning was starting to, well, I had to be really honest with myself about where my money was going. I was raised, and I think a lot of women, my age and a little bit older, were raised in households where, the man was in charge of everything financial. And I was taught that, the man is the head of the household, he's in charge of the finances. And, like I said, I've worked since I was 12. I wanted to, I got an allowance from my parents, but I wanted to make my own money. I was really career driven and very, motivated by, building a career. But at the same time, I still kind of defaulted to that line of thinking. So, I got married really, really young, and I kind of just handed over that responsibility. And there just wasn't a lot of transparency about where things were going, when things were getting paid. So I felt like I was left in the dark quite a bit about financial decisions. And, going out, starting over on my own, I really had to look at where money was being spent, because before it was very out of sight, out of mind. Well, it's not like I'm not dealing with this, I'm not in charge of it. And then all of a sudden being in charge of it was very, like you said, Emily, really empowering. And I felt a sense of freedom. Like I was really scared, but I also felt, you know, it was very freeing because for the first time I was in charge of making the financial decisions. I'm good at it. I know what I'm doing. I've managed, $1 million budgets before for people. And I was finally given the reins to my own life, from a financial standpoint, and able to make decisions that were the best for me and my kids. So the first step in that was being really brutally honest with myself. It's very easy to breeze through Whole Foods and swipe your card for $50 and you don't realize it, but that adds up over time. And I think, one thing that's really difficult for our generation versus, our parents' generation is that everything is so automatic and everything's on your phone. You can tap your phone and pay for things. You can press a button and it comes out of your bank account. Whereas before you were keeping a ledger of everything. You were balancing your checkbook, you were actually writing it down and seeing where that money was coming in and where it was going out. And now, unless you're really diligent and really utilizing financial tracking software, so I use Quicken and it's all connected to my bank account and it groups it into categories for you. And it really shines a light on where you're spending money. And some of it was pretty obvious for me, and some wasn't. Some was really surprising. I think just the amount of money that I was spending at the grocery store. And I had to figure out ways to be more efficient with my money and make it stretch a little bit further. But I also was in a position where I was, behind the steering wheel when it came to setting up, new investment accounts for the girls, setting up investment accounts for myself, setting up savings accounts, high yield savings. And that to me felt really empowering. And that to me became, goals that I wanted to meet, whereas before a goal might have been like, oh, I want to save, or I want to be able to buy X, Y, and Z, or I want to be able to go on this trip. Now the goal, shifted to, I want to be able to put, X amount in per quarter to my girls' 529 college savings account. And it took a lot of discipline. It took a while for all of the changes I was putting into practice to really kind of show up. It's just like anything that you do, you don't see the results at first, but over time, you really start to feel the effects of it. And I got into a really good groove. I mean, it took probably 6 months to really get into a good groove and figure out um, just where everything needed to go and to be, learn how to be really disciplined about it. So, I mean, it was hard it was hard going from two incomes to one just because the amount of money changed, but it honestly was, and just because the amount of discipline that it took, but it was very freeing and it was very empowering to know that like this is mine and nobody has access to it but me, and it's going to be spent the way that I choose and I see fit. And you know that to me was so motivating. So it's scary, but I think if you try and have a different perspective on it, if you try and think of it as this is a chance for me to, shape my financial future rather than kind of having it in somebody else's hands, that's a helpful way to look at it. And it was, that was helpful for me to look at it that way.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. This is so if you were, I have a great friend and she is not the financial head of her household. And if she were to
Mhm.
go to you and say, and you have friends like this too, I'm sure we all do, and say, okay, I trust my spouse fully, but what do I still need to know? Like, what would have helped you to know when you were still married, regardless of the outcome? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm not opposed to one person in the relationship handling the finances. What I'm opposed to is lack of transparency. And that was an issue um, in my marriage, is that there wasn't a lot of transparency about bill paying. There wasn't a lot of, I was not, passwords were withheld from me. And so I couldn't log into accounts to see where the bill was at, and then they would be late. And so I think, if your husband is going to be, or your partner, whatever situation you're in, if somebody is going to take on the responsibility and the role of being the financial manager of your family, then there needs to be full transparency. There needs to be regular check-ins where you sit down and you say, here's our water bill, here's our electric bill, here's, our budget with a shared spreadsheet or a shared financial tracking app, and share with the other person in your family where you're at so that they're aware and they know exactly where, money coming in is going. And so I think, again, I'm not opposed to one person taking on that role, but I do think that if that's the case, there needs to be some structure in place. From like, there needs to be really good communication. There needs to be some structure in place that allows for regular check-ins so that everybody's on the same page. So everybody knows, okay, I know what to expect on the 15th of the month. Here's what's coming out. I know, what our average bill is. So if we get like a crazy high one, we can sit down and talk about like ways to avoid that next month. So, and I think too, a situation that I've never been in, but I know that there are quite a few women in, is women who don't work outside the home, and who, their husband or their partner is the sole provider. And so, when I was first married, I had some friends that I knew who were really young couples, and the women got an allowance, which to me feels very parental. I think, to get an allowance from somebody that you're married to feels a little antiquated to me. I think if you are not earning income outside of the home, and I do think, if you're a stay-at-home mother, that's a job, and it's a big job and you don't get paid for it, but you're still working and you're still contributing to the functionality of your home. And you should still be included in the financial conversation as an essential cog in that wheel rather than just a budget line item. If you're working for your family, essentially, then you're entitled to, you know, be a part of that conversation rather than just be handed something and say, this is what you get. I think women who are stay-at-home moms should speak up for themselves and say, this is what I need. These are things that I want. Can we talk about how to fit that into the budget rather than just accepting what they're given and having to figure it out from there. So I guess the point of all that, sorry, I rambled a bit, but I guess the point of all that is, if somebody is going to take on that primary role, there needs to be like constant communication about finances. There needs to be transparency and no secrets, because secrets when it comes to your finances are so damaging. I think secrets when it comes to anything are so damaging, but you don't want to find out 2 months after the fact that a really major financial decision was made without your input.
I love
So
that.
that would be my advice.
Yeah, and if you are a woman that does not work outside the home, you are still working. I love that you said that, Hattie. And you are contributing to someone else being able to be the financial breadwinner in your family. I mean, so you are just as much a part of that as the working, earning spouse. And so, never feel uncomfortable asking questions. And certainly, this is part of why the Wealth Edit exists. Like, say, I joined this group and we talk about money, and it's just gotten me really excited to learn about our finances in our household. 90% of the time, the spouse is going to be like, thank you. We have a private investment practice called Somerset. And, a lot of male clients come to us and say, hey, I want you all to manage this because I want my wife to be involved. And so most of the time, I think you'll be encouraged that, your spouse wants you to play a part. They want you to know it's a big burden to be the financial head of household. It really is. And so, find encouragement in that. If you're not getting that kind of answer, maybe just revisit it. It might take some time. Just like Hattie said, small things over a period of 6 months. I think good communication, you can get to a place where you feel really comfortable knowing what you feel like you want to know about money. And just not being scared of it either. That what we hear all the time is like, as soon as we say what we do, I'm in wealth management, they're like, most women are like, I don't know anything about money. It's the first thing that women say. And it's almost like this block that we put up. And we don't have to do that because women are really, really, really good with money. And so, it's just like Hattie, you're such a good testament to that.
Yeah. And I want to
Thank you.
for these women that are listening today and anybody who's like, I actually am very interested in that and I want to take a larger role in it. mean, I always say, like, I kind of hate to throw my husband under the bus at this point because he can't defend himself. But I like, the more I learn about finances, the more I am convinced I was the way better choice of the two of us to handle our finances. And it wasn't that he did anything wrong. It was just, he was completely, totally overworked. He, didn't have the time to commit to it. I was
Mhm.
working part time at the time. I could have totally owned that. And I honestly believe that if I had said to him, if I had gone through this exercise and said, look, let's really sit down and talk through what this looks like for you on a month to month basis, I can handle that, and I think he probably would have been like, please, So I think to encourage that conversation as well, because sometimes as a wife, you might say, I honestly am the one that's doing the majority of the spending of the household anyway. May I take that off your plate? And it's a really easy conversation to have. And the husband might say, no, I really love doing this. Or if not, I think a lot of us might be surprised that they'll say, please,
Yeah.
I love
Well,
it. So,
and I
because
think too,
traditional roles that we are scared to like push against.
well, I think like the fear comes from, you know, not being informed. And I think one thing I think what probably happens with a lot of women is that they're just not educated and they're not informed about good financial practices. And that was a huge thing that, you know, that I did when I went out, when I separated, was I need to learn, you know, good financial practices. I just was never really, I mean, I was good at it in business, but when it came to my personal life, I wasn't treating it the same way. And so I think education for women about good financial practices is so key, whether they're in a marriage, in a relationship, or on their own, because if they have the tools, they have the resources, and they can go to their partner and they can say, listen, like, I've been reading a ton, I've learned so much about, this type of investment, and I really think that it's something we should explore. Or I follow this Instagram account that has really great, you know, advice on how to streamline your monthly spending. Can we take a look at it together? And so I think, you know, to me, I feel like education and information is so powerful. And I think for a long time, women were just like, well, I just don't know about it. So like, I'm not handling it. But I do think the, financial landscape, the social landscape is changing so much that there are so many great resources, including the Wealth Edit, out there for women to learn about, how to manage their money, on a personal level and a professional level, how to learn about different types of investments, different, budgeting apps. And so I think that was so important for me, and it was so helpful for me. And it was kind of fun because I'd done this on a business level, but it was fun to kind of build out my own, personal financial picture in the beginning. So I think just finding accounts to follow, reading articles, talking to people about it is super, super helpful if you're wanting to be more involved.
And we have this awesome woman who comes on the Wealth Edit all the time. Her name's Helen Owen, and she is like the budgeting expert. I mean, she's just awesome at it. And it's not, budgeting like we want you to cut out if you drink a latte every day. No, no, no. It's just, but the thing that she says, because we all work hard. And so if you have these little tiny things that you love in your life, we are all for you keeping those things. What we find happens is that like women, as you get older and have kids, and it's like, you're tired and life is stressful. And so you start throwing money at problems like, oh, if I had a cleaning lady one more time a week. Oh, if I had a nicer vehicle. Oh, if I had this, fill in the blank. That may or may not be you. Everybody has their own stuff. And then we don't even, like, we look up and we're like, oh, what am I spending all this money on? Or like another cute shirt. I mean, there's so many things that you can kind of pinpoint. And so Helen has this great phrase, and she says, whatever financial situation you find yourself in. So whether you're deep in debt or have more money than you know what to do with, it really doesn't matter. Let that tiger eat you alive. That's her saying. Like, just take a look at it and face it, because it's never too late for a do-over. I mean, you could be bad with money yesterday and great with money 6 months from now. It's just, it's never too late. So, find encouragement in that. Just look at it and kind of make yourself do it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And I think too, and Jennifer actually just chimed in with a really great point. I think men, you got to know that like men might not be super educated about financial matters, but because that is just a societal assumption that, men take care of the money in the household, I think a lot of people just assume that the man will know what he's doing. And he's taking on this huge burden and this huge responsibility, probably not with a lot of tools of his own, but expected to just figure it out. And so I think if you're starting out in a relationship, or if you're already in a relationship, and, have that conversation with your partner and say, do you feel like you have the tools to handle this? And if not, like, let's figure out what needs to be done, or do we need to hire somebody who can guide us through this? Because you don't want to end up in a situation where you're like, well, I thought you were taking care of it. And then that person doesn't either doesn't want to admit that they didn't know what they were doing, or, does admit, well, I didn't know what I was doing. Sorry, but you gave me all this responsibility. And I actually sat next to Jennifer at dinner last night, and she's a CPA, and we were talking about, just the lack of transparency that still exists in relationships, or for, lack of financial transparency that exists in relationships. And I was telling her about some of my own personal experiences, and, she was like, you would be shocked at how many women come to me and who, are either going through a divorce or recently widowed, and they are just amazed at what was swept under the rug, or what was not taken care of, years of tax returns not filed. And so now there's this massive bill owed to the government. So, I think it's assumed that the man knows what he's doing. And I just think that we need to stop assuming that. And we need to, as women, whether we are contributing financially to the relationship or not, we need to be a part of the conversation, because you don't want to find out way after the fact that things weren't taken care of, and all of a sudden you're staring up this like huge financial mountain you have to climb and figure out how to get to the other side of.
It might not be your spouse. I mean, it might be 90% of women end up as the financial head of household at some point in their life, whether that's, you're single and you weren't expecting to be single, or maybe
Mhm.
preparing for your parents' finances because they're older. I mean, you never know when you're going to be kind of like thrown into this fire. And so that's really what we're here to do, is like help you train you up on some of the issues. So like when you get in that position, you're like, oh, I've dealt with this before, or at least you have a place or a resource that you can go to.
Mhm.
So I echo it. I mean, I'm with you. I've lived it too. And wow, I wish I'd had some training ahead of time, because oftentimes not only are you're finding yourself as the head of a household, which is overwhelming, but you're usually doing it during a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be really helpful to do it when you're not grieving a loss or a sickness or,
Mhm.
accident. Just like be ready. So I love what you said. I think it is just the best takeaway from our conversation today, is to just like dig in, to not be afraid to just say, hey, I want to get more involved. And whether that's looking over a budget, just creating a list of our assets and liabilities, that's a wonderful place to start. And then, like you said, if maybe there's a little bit of resistance, to just come to them a little bit later and say, hey, I've been doing my research. Let's do
Mhm.
this. It's
I know what I'm doing. Yeah.
what I'm doing. And I think that is amazing advice. And thank you for being so open and honest about this. I think this has been
You're
helpful
welcome. Yeah.
Here. And how can we support you? I mean, you have this new venture, and we just want to be supportive and follow along. So, how can this crowd support you?
Um, I mean, word of mouth has been just incredible, for my business. Social media has been great. If you see something on Instagram that you like, share it with your friends. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask about my services. I've had a few people recently say, well, I didn't know if this was like a big enough project for you. I'm still a one person operation. That might change next year, but you know, for now, I'm taking on projects that are, you know, small to big. I don't want to say no to, you know, I don't want to say I don't want to say no to anything, but don't be afraid to reach out because it might be, you know, a simple answer that I can give you if the project is something you can handle yourself, or I just don't want people to think that there's a project that's too small to come to me with. I really love helping people make their homes feel beautiful and welcoming and reflective of their personal style. So just refer your friends, tell them about this new designer out of New Orleans who will travel and take on remote projects and is building her business. And, you know, that's all I can ask for. And I'm so thankful for people who have referred me to friends of theirs and who are sharing on social media and spreading the word.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hattie. And Kitty Brown just said Hattie also has amazing guidance on art and artists, which is all, you know, there's so many wonderful artists out there, but it is nice to have someone that can kind of navigate you through the art scene. So you have another resource.
Yeah, it's something that I'm super passionate about. I mean, that's what my background, you know, is in. And I've been lucky to, you know, I've been lucky to collect pieces from New Orleans artists and Southern artists over the years and build relationships with a lot of them. So I really do love pointing people in their direction. There's a lot of talent that comes out of the South and the Southeast. And, you know, so if you ever are looking for, you know, the perfect piece for a specific space, you know, please reach out. Martine is obviously a fantastic resource for that as well. I work with her. I've started working with her quite a bit now to find pieces for clients' homes. And so she's a wonderful resource there too. So yeah, if you're just in need of that perfect piece, reach out and I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Hattie. We have just really enjoyed having you today. And thank y'all. And everybody check out Hattie's new logo as well. You've
Oh
got
yeah, we just rebranded with Kara McGuire from Minmoo Studios did the rebranding. So she just nailed it and I'm so happy with it and it's so beautiful. And the website is in process. There's a really beautiful landing page that has a scrolling wheel of images with some of the project I've worked on. So check it out. And thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to tune in. I'm running around a lot today, but I'm going to tune into some sessions from my phone.
that sounds
And I'm
great.
so glad you guys are here in New Orleans.
We have a Kara McGuire and Ashley Arsenault from Small Chalk. They're coming on next. So
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I'm going to put it on and, you know, finish getting ready for the day, but I can't wait to listen to what they have to say. They're so talented. So thank you guys for bringing all of us together. This is just really cool to see. And New Orleans is such a small town and it's really fun to, it was fun to see the list of names and to know most everybody on there. So, you know, I'm proud to be a part of this community here and glad you guys are here.
all right. Thank you,
Thanks.
Hattie.
Thank you guys. Bye.